So, hello there, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies video. I am Spike Knight, of course, and in these videos I love talking about things, movies and TV, and whatever I want or whenever I want. And in today's video, I am going back to my Star Wars reviews. Well, I'm kind of continuing my Star Wars reviews actually, as I review The Mandalorian Season 1. So, let's get into it, shall we? Let's get into my discussion on The Mandalorian Season 1. So, last year, I did a lot of Star Wars reviews. Actually, I started doing my Star Wars reviews 2 years ago now. Wow, that's flown by. It did not feel like 2 years ago when I reviewed The Phantom Menace, but it was nevertheless. And I continued my Star Wars reviews last year, and I'm continuing them again now. And I'm continuing them now as we have a new Star Wars movie, our first Star Wars movie in 7 years, coming out this year in cinemas, which is insane. It does not feel like there's a new Star Wars movie coming out this year, for good and for bad, and I am quite surprised by how soon it's coming out. Like, if people don't know already, the new Star Wars movie coming out this year is The Mandalorian and Grogu, and it is coming out in late May of this year. It's coming out on May the 23rd, if I'm not mistaken, which isn't that far away. We're in February now, March next month, April the month after that, then we're in the month of May, which is the same month that the movie comes out. So it's quite insane how close this movie is. And I'm recording this, by the way, the day before the new trailer's release. I know there's meant to be a new trailer coming out on Super Bowl Sunday. So I don't know. Maybe that trailer will get more people talking about the movie. But right now, it does not feel like a new Star Wars movie is coming out this year. But I'm very excited about it, because you may have guessed already if you've looked at the t-shirt I'm wearing in today's video, or if you look behind me, I'm a big Star Wars fan. I am a huge Star Wars fan, hence why I refer to the franchise so much in my videos. Yeah, most of my videos I'll make a comparison to Star Wars somehow. It's such a big part of my life. And I thought I'd continue my Star Wars reviews by reviewing the Star Wars Disney Plus TV shows before the release of the new Star Wars movie this year, The Mandalorian and Grogu, which is an extension of the Mandalorian TV series that has been on Disney Plus. That's what I'm going to do over the next couple of weeks to months on this channel, leading up to the release of The Mandalorian and Grogu in late May. However, I also want to say here that I'm not going to review every Star Wars Disney Plus TV show leading up to the release of The Mandalorian and Grogu. Like, I'm not going to talk about Andor Seasons 1 and 2. Partly because Andor Season 2 only came out last year, and I think my thoughts on it wouldn't have changed, you know what I mean? Like, it came out not too long ago, and I still remember that series very well. And secondly, because, well, I don't think Andor, the TV show, is going to have any relevance to The Mandalorian and Grogu whatsoever. I could be wrong, but I just don't think that's going to be the case. And I'm not going to review The Acolyte, because first of all, I didn't enjoy it, and I don't want to be one of those, you know, YouTube channels who just talk about Star Wars in a negative way non-stop. I didn't enjoy The Acolyte. I reviewed The Acolyte, and to be honest, I don't really want to talk about it again. And so yes, I also don't think that's going to have any relevance to the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Again, I could be wrong, but I don't think that's going to be the case. And I'm not sure if I'm going to go back and re-review Obi-Wan Kenobi. Not because I didn't enjoy it. I did enjoy it when it first came out, and it would be interesting to see if I still enjoyed it now, a couple of years since it came out. But I don't know again if it will have any relevance to the Mandalorian and Grogu. I'm tempted to go back and look at Obi-Wan Kenobi though. I am tempted. But only time will tell to see whether I do. Whether I have enough time, because in the weeks to months leading up to the release of The Mandalorian and Grogu, I will be reviewing The Mandalorian Season 1, which I'm talking about in today's video. I will be talking about The Mandalorian Season 2 in my next Star Wars review. Then I'll be re-reviewing The Book of Boba Fett, which is a very divisive TV show, very divisive Star Wars TV show. Then I'll be talking about The Mandalorian Season 3, which is also a very divisive Star Wars TV show. And then I will also be re-reviewing the Ahsoka TV show, which I do think will have relevance to this new Star Wars movie coming out this year. So, let's start off with The Mandalorian Season 1, where the Mandalorian story began all the way back in 2019, which, Doesn't feel like that. Doesn't feel that long ago now, but actually, it was 7 years ago now. That's how long it's been since the last Star Wars movie came out. The last Star Wars movie came out in December of 2019, and that was, of course, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. And this is the first Star Wars movie to come out since then, to come out in cinemas as well, which again is insane because it does not feel like a new Star Wars movie is coming out this year, for good and for bad reasons. But anyway, yes, the Mandalorian's journey began all the way back. The Mandalorian TV show journey began all the way back in November of 2019. That's when the show arrived on Disney Plus in the USA. However, I think in Europe, if I'm not mistaken, this was definitely the case in the UK where I live, but I think in Europe as well, it arrived on Disney Plus in March of 2020, just in time for when lockdown was happening. Remember lockdown? Nobody discussed at that time now, but yeah, this was the TV show that kind of got me through the worry of lockdown at the time. Like, I remember when the Mandalorian season 1 was coming out, I didn't really know what life was going to be like. We're going into lockdown. We're going into this thing I didn't know, we're going into the unknown. We're going into the unknown, to quote Frozen 2. I didn't know what was going to be happening for the next couple of months, let alone years, and The Mandalorian was coming out, and I'd heard all these great things about it because it had already come out in America a good few months beforehand. So when I heard that it was coming out, it was kind of like the one thing I could look forward to in this time of unknown, you know what I mean? And I remember when that first season of The Mandalorian came out in the UK in March of 2020, and just enjoying myself so much while I was watching the series. I mean, the funny thing was, I'd heard everything that happened in the show already, because I'm a Star Wars nut. I love this franchise, and because the show had already released in the US, I'd watched these film podcasters and these film pundits who, live in the US talk about the show and talk about it in full spoilery detail. So I knew everything that happened. I knew about Baby Yoda. I knew that was happening at the end of the first episode. I knew about Moff Gideon. I knew about all these different things that happened in the series. I knew about the IG unit being bad in the first episode, or kind of bad, and then turning out to be good and saving Baby Yoda in the last episode. I knew all the spoilers, and by the way, I should have put a spoiler warning there, but you get the point I'm making. I knew all the spoilers going into Mandalorian Season 1, but I didn't care. It didn't take away from my enjoyment. I watched the first season of The Mandalorian, and I was just so into it. I was having the time of my life watching this season in a way that I didn't expect. I didn't know whether a live-action Star Wars series could work on TV. Before then, we hadn't had any live-action Star Wars series. We only had the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, two things which just did not work for me, simply because of the animation. I can't get into those TV shows. I've tried time and time again, but they're just not for me. And I was worried that was going to be the case with The Mandalorian, but it wasn't. And the show, it was a source of comfort and a source of enjoyment in a time when I really needed that. And I think in a time when a lot of people really needed that, you know what I mean? And I haven't really watched the show in full since I first saw it in 2020. I've seen bits of it here and there because my brothers had it on in the house, and so I've watched a few episodes here and there, a couple of episodes I've returned to just because I remember enjoying them so much and I want to get that feeling again, and I have had that feeling again when I've rewatched certain episodes of The Mandalorian Season 1 here and there over the past couple of years. But I haven't watched the full season. I haven't watched all of Season 1 in full since seeing it in March of 2020. So I was actually quite looking forward to doing so recently. I watched it about a week or two ago now, and I was kind of worried because since the release of The Mandalorian Season 1, Star Wars, it feels like Star Wars has become more and more divisive, if you know what I mean. If you look online, it's always divisive, but it feels like it's become more divisive. And also, since the release of The Mandalorian Season 1, we've also had the Andor TV show, which is some of the best writing I think Star Wars has ever had, period. I think it's some of the best Star Wars we've had since the original trilogy, and I think it's absolutely a tremendous piece of work. And I was worried that my love for Andor would somehow affect my love for The Mandalorian, you know what I mean? I was worried that I wouldn't view Mandalorian in the same light, because the first time I watched it was before Andor came out, if you follow my thinking. I thought my loving of Andor would affect my liking and my loving even of The Mandalorian Season 1. But I still wanted to give this TV show another rewatch, particularly with the movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu, coming out within the next few months. Like, that's genuinely what's happening, which is still kind of insane in my opinion, that a new Star Wars movie is coming out this quickly. I mean, it doesn't feel this quickly, by the way. Sign on here. It doesn't feel like it's coming out this quickly. It's been 7 years since the last Star Wars movie came out in cinemas. But at the same time, this one's kind of creeped up on us. That's what it feels like. And again, for good and for bad. I'll talk about that more in a different video, but why I'm saying for good and for bad there. But yeah, it does not really feel as a new Star Wars movie coming out soon. Not really. Anyway, with the release of the new Star Wars movie coming out soon, though, I knew that I wanted to rewatch this season to see if I still enjoyed it, to see if it still held up, and also to see if there's anything important that happened in the season that would be relevant in the movie. I hope that wouldn't be the case. By the way, I hope that's not the case. I hope with the movie, with the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, I hope that it appeals to people who haven't also watch the TV show. Like, I hope it manages to do both things. Appeal to people who are fans of the Mandalorian TV show, but also appeal to Star Wars fans who perhaps haven't seen the Mandalorian. But I wanted to see this TV show nonetheless. I wanted to go back and rewatch The Mandalorian Season 1 to see if I still liked it before the release of The Mandalorian and Grogu. And that's exactly what I did a couple of weeks ago now. And honestly, much to no one's surprise, yes, I still enjoyed this TV show. I still really like The Mandalorian Season 1. I still like it a hell of a lot. And I'll tell you why I think it works so well. Because it manages to balance the familiarity with the originality. Basically, you have the stuff in there which is aimed at Star Wars fans. You have all the little fan service elements, so there's so things can go, oh, that refers to something back in Return of the Jedi, or something back from Empire Strikes Back, or something from A New Hope, or even something from the prequels, for fans of the prequels. You have all those elements in there. And yes, what this show does really well, in my opinion, is it adds a twist on those elements. So, for instance, you have probably the most talked about aspects of the TV show, Baby Yoda, aka the child, aka Grogu. He's not known as Grogu by the time this season came out, but he came to be known as Grogu, I think, in Season 3. If I remember correctly, it might have been Season 2. Anyway, you have Baby Yoda, aka the child, aka Grogu in the series, which is a play-off, Yoda. And what this series does very well is it plays off that iconic character, that iconic fan favourite character, which has become so ingrained into pop culture. The character of Yoda become this huge figure in pop culture, referred to time and time again. But what this series does well is it draws on that character. It gets fans of Star Wars, or maybe even just casual fans of Star Wars, people who aren't too in it gets people who are fans of Star Wars and casual fans of Star Wars into the show by showing this character who looks familiar, but also doing something different with that character. Instead of a Yoda species being around the Jedi, this time the Yoda species is around a bounty hunter, and it actually forms this sort of father and son relationship, this sort of found family, this lone cub relationship with those two characters. And that's what I think works the best in this series. The whole stuff with Baby Yoda, I think it's kind of genius, because you don't expect... First of all, you didn't expect... No one went into The Mandalorian expecting there to be a Yoda species. And they put it in this show, and they use it not only to have people talking about the show, not only to have a talking point about the show, and only to sell toys, because, man alive, look at the amount of toys that Baby Yoda was sold. I mean, just back there, I've got a Baby Yoda, huge Baby Yoda Funko Pop. I've got quite a few other Baby Yoda Funko Pops in this room that you just can't see right now. But not only did Baby Yoda, aka the child, aka Grogu, become this big thing in marketing that sold billions of toys, I'm guessing, it also becomes this great narrative device, which they use very well, in that, the Mandalorian, our titular character, is protecting Baby Yoda, aka the child, aka Grogu, and it also forms the sort of father and son relationship between those two characters, and that, at the end of the day, is always what Star Wars is about. The best of Star Wars is always about family. You go back to the original trilogy, everyone, look at Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. That's the kind of meaty part of the original trilogy. The best of Star Wars relies on family. It always goes back to that central theme of family, and The Mandalorian doesn't forget that. I remember sitting down to watch The Mandalorian, even so I knew what the show was about. I sat down to watch it thinking, oh, it's going to be a show about a bounty hunter doing a bunch of missions and hanging out with some cool characters, and maybe we'll see, I don't know, some characters what you see in the Star Wars galaxy come back. But then actually, it turned out to be the show about family, and I just remember being so taken by that and so surprised by that, even though, like what he said, I knew what was happening in the show. I was still surprised by that. I was still surprised by the heart of the show and the thing that really drives this whole show forward. And that is the relationship between the Mandalorian and Grogu, which I'm going to guess is why the movie's called that. That's coming out later this year. And so, yeah, that is, I think, one of the main reasons this show works. But also, going back to that thing of, originality and familiarity, and mixing those two things together. Having something like Baby Yoda, aka the child, aka Grogu, something which is familiar, something we've already seen before, but adding its own twist on it. That's what The Mandalorian does so well. That's what I think the best of Disney Star Wars does, because people complain so much about Disney Star Wars, and they say, oh, it's not offering anything too new, but then it does something new. It does something that doesn't feel like we've seen in Star Wars before, and yet it still gets people complaining about it. The Andor TV show, it's different than the Star Wars we've seen before, but people still complained about Andor. There's some people still out there who didn't like Andor, didn't think it felt like Star Wars, and that's totally fair, that's their opinion, but you can't have it both ways. You can't ask for something completely new and different and then complain that it feels too new and different and not like Star Wars at all, you know what I mean? You need to have that sort of familiarity in there, and I think that's what the best of Disney Star Wars understands. That's what Star Wars The Force Awakens understood, and then that's why that movie resonated with so many people. For me, that's what The Last Jedi understood, and that's why that movie works for me so much. I know that's an unpopular opinion. Well, it's not necessarily unpopular. It's not necessarily unpopular, but that movie divided a lot of people. However, I'm somebody who loves The Last Jedi, but what I'm saying is, the best of Disney Star Wars understands that it needs to have that sense of familiarity in there and that sense of originality as well, and it has in other instances throughout this show. You have an IG unit, something we saw, a droid that we saw in Empire Strikes Back briefly, but instead of having the IG unit as this bounty hunter, which we see him as in the first episode, at the end of this season of The Mandalorian, they had a twist on that character. They make the character the saviour. That character saves Baby Yoda, aka the child, aka Grogu, and ends up becoming a fan favourite character to the point that he came back in season 3. You have, what's his name? I forget his name now on the top of my head, it's going to bug me. But you have the Ugnaught, who, we've seen that creature in the Star Wars franchise before. We've seen that creature in Empire Strikes Back. It's a sort of, the pig-looking creature that takes away C-3PO and dismantles C-3PO in that Cloud City, Empire Strikes Back. We've seen that sort of creature in the Star Wars galaxy before. But in the past, we didn't like that sort of creature. Like, oh, that creature took about that creature. When we saw it in the past, it took about C-3PO, and we didn't like that sort of character. Now in this series, they put that sort of creature back in, and they make that creature likable in the Ugnaught, who keeps saying, "This is the way." I forgot what the character's called. It's going to bug me. I'm going to put it on the caption below right now. But anyway, I love that character. And again, it's playing on something we've already seen in the Star Wars galaxy before, but doing something different with it. It's drawing as fans of the Star Wars franchise back. It's reminding us of something we loved in the Star Wars franchise before, but again, it's doing something original with it. Same with the Jawas in Episode 2. We've seen the Jawas in the Star Wars galaxy quite a few times. We've seen them in A New Hope, most famously and probably most memorably. And in this season, we have a whole action set piece with the Jawas. And again, it's just going back to the whole thing. It's managing to do something something different but familiar at the same time. And that is why I think that's one of the main reasons I think The Mandalorian works so well. I think it's that and the central relationship between a titular character, The Mandalorian, and Grogu. And that whole thing with originality and familiarity mixed together, that whole thing with, doing something different but doing something familiar, is also evident in the musical score by Ludwig Göransson. Apologies if I mispronounced his name there, but Ludwig Göransson, who since scoring the first season of the show has gone on to win another Oscar. I think he's got like 2 Oscars now, and he's up for an Oscar this year for his musical score for Sinners. He's worked on so many great musical scores in the past. He did the musical score to Black Panther, which I'm pretty sure he won his first Academy Award for. He did the musical score to Oppenheimer, which came out a couple of years ago now, which I think he won his second Academy Award for. And he's just done the music to Sinners, and he's up for an Academy Award for that. And I think he's going to win the Academy Award for musical score for Sinners. Not that the Oscars matter, but anyway, yeah, he's done so many great musical scores in the past. And this might still be my favourite piece of his work, though. His work on The Mandalorian, I still think, might be his best work, because he was really the first, well, actually no, he wasn't. I was about to say he was the first composer to compose some of Star Wars after John Williams, but he wasn't. Michael Giacchino did the music for Rogue One, and John Powell did the music for Solo, so he wasn't. But what I think Ludwig Göransson does very well is he still has those classic orchestral moments in the musical score that we expect from something in the Star Wars franchise, because of John Williams' incredible orchestral musical scores for the all 9 main Star Wars movies. But what Ludwig Göransson does as well is he also had some electronic music in the score to The Mandalorian. He also has some modern music that we perhaps, we don't expect to hear in a Star Wars musical score, that we hadn't heard in a Star Wars musical score up until this point in the score to The Mandalorian Season 1. And in doing so, it makes the show feel different, but again, having those orchestral moments that almost sound John Williams-like at times, having them in the score as well makes it feel familiar. The musical score does a great job of understanding that the show is trying to do something familiar but also something different. And I think the musical score, I think Ludwig Göransson did an absolutely tremendous job. The musical score to the first season of The Mandalorian in particular, I mean, I really like all of his work with The Mandalorian, but I think the first season, then again, I might change my mind after rewatching the second season for sure, but I think his work with the first season is quite something when you think about it. It's not an easy task he had, and it doesn't make it sound like John Williams. I mean, it's got that John Williams little touch to it, like all Star Wars scores should do, in my opinion, because John Williams, he's the music of Star Wars, really. I mean, so you have to have a bit of that John Williams influence in there, and I do think Ludwig Göransson does, but he also has his own twist on it. If you listen to other Ludwig Göransson scores, like I said, he scored to Black Panther, he scored to Oppenheimer, he scored to Sinners. If you listen to his other scores, they have that Ludwig Göransson touch to it. They have this like electronic sort of modern day feel to the scores, and he does the same here, and I think it's really effective. Because it also adds to the atmosphere of the show, and that's another reason I think this show works. It's its own beast. This show was no easy feat to do. To have the first live-action Star Wars Disney Plus TV show is no easy thing, because up until this point, live-action Star Wars had only ever been on the big screen. And in 2019, that all of a sudden wasn't the case when The Mandalorian Season 1 began airing. But this show still manages to feel like Star Wars in the production value, which is all over the screen in the best way possible, in the way it feels, in the way that it feels like it's part of the Star Wars galaxy, but it also feels like it's a different part of the Star Wars galaxy. It feels like it's its own beast. I would even argue that you don't need to be a Star Wars fan in order to enjoy this show. You could watch this show not being a Star Wars fan, not having watched any of the 9 movies or any of the spin-off movies or Clone Wars or Rebels, and you'd still like the show. I mean, sure, if you've watched all that stuff, there's more you might get from this show, but I think this show manages to stand on its own 2 feet whilst also feeling like Star Wars, and that's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to have this as your first live action Star Wars TV show on a streaming service work. But I think Jon Favreau, who's a creator on the show, who's also directed many great movies in the past. You know, he's a guy who directed the first Iron Man. He directed Chef, which is a wonderful film. He directed Elf, which is a Christmas classic. He's directed great movies in the past. He's also starred in many great movies. He plays Happy Hogan in the MCU and in the Iron Man films in particular. He is the reason this show works, because he created this show. And Dave Filoni, who is, you know, a big figure in Lucasfilm, I think he's actually the head of creative at Lucasfilm now. He was like the person behind Clone Wars after George Lucas left. He was the person behind Star Wars Rebels. He's the person who came up with the character Ahsoka, which is quite an important character in the Star Wars franchise now. You know, these two people came together, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni came together for The Mandalorian, and what they did, as what he said, is make something which feels like Star Wars, but also make something which stands on its own 2 feet. And that, again, that's no easy thing to do, to make a live-action Star Wars Disney Plus TV show work, but they make it work effortlessly, in my opinion. I think Dave Filoni, who directed the first episode of The Mandalorian, did an absolutely brilliant job. And I think that's like the first thing he directed. And you watch the way that first episode was directed, and it's like, okay, I'm so into this, and just so enjoyable to watch. And some people might say, oh yeah, but I wanted a bit more from it, I wanted it to be deeper. But the thing is, I think for what the first season of Mandalorian is, I think it works. I don't think it needs to be something deep. I don't think it needs to be something on the same level as Andor. You know, Andor is its own beast as well. Andor is a tremendously written show. I've already said, I think it's the best written piece of Star Wars, you know, probably since the original trilogy, and I'd even argue it's better written than parts of Return of the Jedi and A New Hope even. Call me crazy, but I do think that is the case. However, when I am feeling like I want some entertaining Star Wars to watch, I'm not sure if I'm going to go back to Andor. When I want something that's going to really move me emotionally in the Star Wars galaxy, I will go back and rewatch Andor. But when I want something in the Star Wars galaxy that's more entertaining, that I can watch with my lunch, you know, whilst I'm having food or doing something like building Lego, I can go back and rewatch an episode of The Mandalorian, and I'll feel like I had a blast. You know, and I think that's what Star Wars needs to do at the end of the day. It needs to entertain you. It needs to make for a really enjoyable viewing experience. You know, at the end of the day, the original Star Wars movies are very entertaining films. There's a lot more to them, but they also, you know, they didn't forget when they're making those movies that they had to be very entertaining. And I don't think the filmmakers behind this show forgot that too. It's still just a very entertaining series that provides us escapism to what's going on in the world. Like I already said, I started watching The Mandalorian all the way back in March 2020 when COVID was beginning to rise and when lockdown was happening, and I needed that escapism, and that's why it worked for me so well for the first time. And there's stuff going on in my life right now which I'm not going to get into, but having this escapism, having something which I can just smile at and be thoroughly entertained by whilst I'm having my lunch, whilst I'm having some downtime, is something that I need. It's something that I want from a Star Wars, something that I want from a piece of Star Wars media, and something that, in my opinion, The Mandalorian Season 1 still delivers on. And another big reason it works is because you care about the titular character. You care about The Mandalorian. Even so, you barely ever see his face in the season. You see his face once in the season, but that's in the last episode. Up until the last episode, you hadn't seen the Mandalorian's face, and you care about him throughout this season. You know, you care about him through his mannerisms, through his actions. Yeah, as soon as he takes care of Baby Yoda, aka the child, aka Grogu, you immediately care about the character. You immediately start to grow this allegiance to him. And I love the way the character is written. There is so little dialogue in the best of The Mandalorian that makes the show work. It goes back to the whole thing that I talk about a lot on this channel. This is age-old adage in Hollywood. You know, show, don't tell. Stop telling the audience why you should like this character. Stop telling the audience what's going on here. And instead, show us why we should like this character and show us what's going on here. And The Mandalorian understands that. The Mandalorian shows us through the character's actions, his mannerisms, and what he does, and through the way it's written, but not with dialogue, why we should like this character. I was surprised whilst rewatching the first season of The Mandalorian how little the character actually says, you know? And that's what and yet you still care about him so much. And it's the same with Baby Yoda in a way. The character doesn't really say much, and yet you fall in love with him. Although that's also because Baby Yoda is a very cute looking character. I mean, even I'll admit that, and I hate using the word cute. Anyway, but the point I'm making is, I really love how this show, makes you care about the Mandalorian, yet you don't see his face, and that's not an easy task to do. That's not an easy task to do in the slightest, and yet the Mandalorian does it effortlessly. As soon as he comes on screen, I'm like, that's our protagonist, and I already feel allegiance to him. And I still can't quite put my finger on why that is the case, but I think, like I've already said, I think it's because of that whole thing, show, don't tell. This TV show doesn't tell us why we should like the Mandalorian. There's no character, there's no alien in this TV show going, oh, the Mandalorian's a good guy because blah 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 blah. No. We just grow to like the character because of his actions and because of the way the character's written. It's a whole thing, show, don't tell. When it works well, it's so effective, and I think it's effective in this season. Now, I'm not saying The Mandalorian Season 1 doesn't have its issues, and I'm not just saying this because I know it's become a bit of a controversial figure, but I don't think Gina Carano is the best actress. I think even she would probably admit that. She's not great as Cara Dune, and there's a couple of moments in the show where her acting ability is shown, and not in the best way. She's never been my favourite character. She's just enjoyable to watch. I don't dislike that character, but I just feel they could have got a better actor to play her, in all honesty. And there are a couple of parts of the season when you can feel the volume. And what I mean by that, I don't mean the sound. The volume is basically oversimplifying it here, but the volume is a sort of virtual reality set that was used in the making of The Mandalorian. It's also been used in the making of other Star Wars Disney Plus shows, and it's been used in the making of films like The Batman and Thor Love and Thunder. I think it's been used in the making of quite a few Marvel movies, actually, and it was also used in the filmmaking of the Game of Thrones spin-off House of the Dragon. It's been used loads since it was used in The Mandalorian, I think. Yeah, I think The Mandalorian was the first thing to use it. I could be mistaken there, do correct me if I'm wrong, but I think The Mandalorian was the first thing to really use the volume, this virtual reality set, which helps, the actors in these shows, helps them, and the filmmakers, helps the reality of the show realised more. Again, I'm oversimplifying it, there's a lot more to it, and there's stuff on Disney Plus about the volume, which is really interesting, and I do feel it is an interesting piece of filmmaking. I'm not against the use of the volume, but I also feel it can be limiting. And I'm going to talk about this more as I talk about The Mandalorian Seasons 2 and 3 in future reviews on this channel. But what I will say is that I do think the volume makes for some limiting setting at times. I can clearly tell in a couple of parts of the series that the actors were working on the volume and that they weren't working on real locations. There are a couple of parts of the series where they are on the real location, you can tell, and it's more effective actually. But with this season, I think you can tell at times that they were acting alongside the volume, and not in the best way. And there are a couple of episodes in the season which I don't love. I think it's 5 and 6. The episode with the prison break, I feel could have had a better ending. It ends in kind of a messy way, and episode 6, where the Mandalorian has to help someone on a mission, I don't love, because it just kind of feels a bit like a filler episode. It's not a bad watch, it's still kind of entertaining, I just don't think it's the best episode. But I think the rest of the episodes I find really enjoyable, and even those 2 episodes I think have highlights to them, That first time I watched the prison episode, I didn't like it, but I rewatched it again, and I was like, oh, this is a really fun episode. I just think it could have had a better ending. And I think, each episode I enjoyed watching in its own way, and each episode has something about it. And even episodes which you might call filler, like the Jawa episode 2, you might call that filler, but then there's a part to that episode which is really important when you see Baby Yoda save are teaching the character the Mandalorian. You realise, oh, actually, Baby Yoda cares about the Mandalorian. That's quite an important moment, you know, before the Mandalorian's about to be killed by that beast thing. Anyway, yeah, I do also think that the quote-unquote filler episodes end up becoming important. And I think each episode, like I said, is enjoyable in its own way. And I love the way the season ends. Love the last 2 episodes. I think they're absolutely brilliant. I think that many of the filmmakers who worked in this season did a great job. And I just think this show overall, I think season 1 of The Mandalorian is a really enjoyable piece of Star Wars television, and it's really well done. I think it's far better done than people give it credit for. And yeah, I was watching this season, and every time when I'd sit down to watch an episode with my lunch, I would just smile from ear to ear. Even in the episodes that I don't love, I would still smile from ear to ear watching, because there's just something about them which feels like Star Wars. And again, it's going back to the whole thing. They kind of feel original but familiar at the same time. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to get right. But I think The Mandalorian gets it right. Yeah, I really, really like The Mandalorian Season 1. Really like it. And so, that's why I'm going to say that it's an 8 out of 10. Again, it's not without its flaws. And I will say, rewatching it after watching the Andor TV series, I was a bit like, oh, the writing could be a bit better here and there. But honestly, for what this TV show is, like I've already said, it works. It's a really enjoyable piece of Star Wars TV. And I think that's what it kind of wants to be, and I think that's what it succeeds in being. And it's got some deep parts to it as well, like when you learn about the Mandalorian's past. And when you see that he's actually similar to Baby Yoda, when you learn why he, you know, really cares about Baby Yoda so much. And I think it's the last episode. I love that whole stuff when you see about his past and you see him being saved by the people, by the Mandalorians, you know. I think that works great, and the action sequences are really well done. It's got some really good writing, and then again, the show makes you care about our central character without knowing too much, without so much dialogue surrounding him, and without actually seeing his face. And it's got the TV show as well. It's this season Mandalorian as well, the whole of Mandalorian actually. It's about family, and that's what Star Wars has always been about, and the Mandalorian understands that, and it understands that in the best way. Yes, as I've already said, I really like the Mandalorian Season 1 still, and it's actually made me look forward to the Mandalorian and Grogu movie more, which is coming out later this year. And that movie is actually my most anticipated movie for this year. I'm not actually looking forward to that many movies this year, but that's still my most anticipated movie. However, I wish I was looking forward to it more. But this season of The Mandalorian, rewatching it recently, has made me look forward to it more. And I'm really looking forward to rewatching Season 2 of The Mandalorian as well, because I remember liking that even more than Season 1, and I'm hoping that's still the case when I rewatch it shortly. But as of now, I think The Mandalorian Season 1 is still a really great piece of work. That is immensely enjoyable to watch, and that's why I still, yeah, really like it. And so, all in all, as I've already said, and as I'm going to say once more in this video today, The Mandalorian Season 1 is an 8 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that's it for today's video. If you have seen The Mandalorian Season 1, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. I'd be surprised if you have seen it and you watched up to this point of the video. But still, yes, please let me know your thoughts on The Mandalorian Season 1 in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching this video today. And if you haven't yet and you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe on this channel, and look forward to many more videos coming very soon on this channel as well. As I already said, thank you for watching this video today, and yeah, look forward to my view of The Mandalorian Season 2 coming very, very soon. But until then guys, I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.